Hey guys, what's going on? It's Coach BJ Olson, head coach of Performance Cycle Coaching and the head development coach of Search for Speed by USA Cycling. We did a couple videos, little quick 1 minute tips, put them up on YouTube or put them up on Instagram, and they were how to pace your 500, how to know if your splits are appropriate for the gear you're using, for the fitness you have. So we're going to go over those 3 rules. We're going to look at some data. We're going to validate some of those. We're going to go into some depth. As always, this is just some quick and dirty rules. There's going to be exceptions. Chances are you're probably not the exception. The exceptions are going to be very specialized type of riding. Maybe someone who specializes in man one, specifically at an elite level, versus someone who specializes in man three in a team sprint. But for most people, especially people probably watching this video, these rules are going to apply. They're going to help you dial in your time trial. Okay, so the 3 rules were quarter lap rule, first lap, second lap rule, and top speed rule. So we're going to go over those. They're going to tell you how do I know if I'm using the right gear and how do I know if my conditioning is appropriate to the gears that I'm using. So let's switch over to the computer and take a look at some data. I pulled a couple numbers from, I believe these are all Masters Nationals. So I pulled these all from Masters Nats 2023. And I also have some extra data in there from a younger elite rider. So let's take a look at these. Here we go. I pulled Todd Shesky and Will Wong. They were in the same age group, so it's kind of easy to pull the same age group. I have Kirk Robinson, different age group. He's one age group higher, but I happen to coach Kirk Robinson. And S, we're going to leave it as S. S is in the Search for Speed program, so I also coach him, or this person. And let's start up here. Okay, so the way that nationals is timed, anything with like a timing strip or an official time trial, typically they don't take the quarter lap split, so we're not going to have those. The only person I have quarter lap splits for is going to be S, and that's because I took them myself. So let's go over the quarter lap rule with S, because that's rule number 1. Quarter lap rule. The quarter lap rule is that the first quarter lap, which you can see here, Q1, or 62.5 meters, this is all based on a 500-meter track, 250-meter track, 500-meter time trial, so 2 laps. The quarter lap rule is that the quarter lap should be almost the same time as the second half lap. Sorry. So we break up the track into, or we break up the time trial into 4 half laps. There's the first half lap, which is standing start to the 125. Then there's the second half lap, 125 to 250. Third half lap is 250 to 375, and the last half lap is 375 all the way to the end. So the first quarter should be about the same time as the second half. So from 125 to 250, give or take 2/10. If there's going to be a difference in those 2/10, the second half lap should be 1 or 2/10 faster. It should not be 1 or 2/10 slower. And so let's take a look at S. You can see I'm highlighting this here. This is the spot we're looking at. 7.73 is going to be our quarter lap split. Pretty good quarter lap split. And 7.70 is going to be the second half lap split. Almost identical to 300ths of a second. That could just be, you know, a very small variance in the timing strip or the hand time, whatever it was that we took. So if we look at these two, they're almost identical. And if we were going to give him some leeway to be off plus or minus 2/10, we would want to see that second half maybe be 7.6 or as low as 7.5. If you start getting too much faster, 7.4, 7.3, we start really doing some blazing second half lap splits. That means that your ability to accelerate to top speed outweighs your ability to initially accelerate to the quarter. So there's a disparity between your fitness and your ability, whether that's because you used too big of a gear that you weren't able to develop fast enough in the first half of the race or whatever. So we want to see within 2/10, first quarter lap equal to the second half lap. You will almost never see that second half lap be slower than the quarter lap. Part of this is it's twice as long, right? So the quarter lap is 62.5. The second half lap is a whole 125-meter effort. So if you're going twice the distance and it's going slower than your standing quarter, there's going to be some issues. Um, this typically happens when you have an amazing standing start, but it's rare, but like just weak, not super strong, not very forceful, don't have the ability to hit top speed, or used such a tiny gear that you hit top speed within a quarter lap, and you just totally spun out the gear, and you don't have the ability to pedal that quickly to develop the gear. Um, that's those are the situations. Very rare. Typically, we'll see them be even or a little bit faster. If it's too fast, it means that our standing start did not uh, happen correctly. Maybe we used too big of a gear, so the equipment was wrong, or maybe it's our rate of force development, rate of torque development, standing start technique, all of that. So, just a quick aside, this just kind of leads me, and I'm probably say this in every video. There's no such thing as too small or too big of a gear. It tends to be too small for your ability to utilize, or too big for your ability to utilize. On a really small gear, it's going to be easier to get up to speed. You're gonna pass through that torque phase quicker, um, but you're also going to peak your speed. You're going to peak your top speed pretty soon, and then you're going to be met with having to apply force at a very high rate because the pedals are moving faster on a smaller gear. So you're gonna have to develop the force at a really, really high rate in order to keep up with the pedal speed. It's a fixed gear bike, so you have to keep up with the necessary pedal speed for the speed you're going. Very taxing on the central nervous system. Most people don't have this ability. It's kind of a uniquely BMX ability, which is why BMX racers tend to make great sprinters. Um, So that tends to be the problem with going too small. Going too big, it's usually your rate of torque development. So you're not able to generate enough initial torque to get off the line. Maybe you're not forceful enough and your technique is not efficient enough. So it takes you too long to get up to speed. So it's going to slow down your quarter lap. But once you get moving, you have the ability, there's a little bit more leeway. So you have the ability to get up to speed, and then you'll see too big of a difference between those two. And that's usually because your the gear was too big and you didn't have the torque development or the force. So that's how you can kind of determine what you should do with those gears. No such thing as too big or too small. It's just your ability to pedal that particular gear with the conditioning you have. So that's S. We're bang on here. 7.7 to 7.7. We love it. Let's say typically I would do this 1 minus 2. We have a difference of 0.03. I would accept up to a difference of 0.2. So let's just bounce around just for the sake of looking at other people. Will Wong. Let's look at his first lap, second lap. So with the first lap, second lap, we're looking for a ratio of 75%. So if we look here, this is the quarter lap, half lap. He doesn't have a quarter, so it's just half lap, second half, third half, fourth half. Lap one and lap two. So we're going to look at lap one, or let's do lap two divided by lap one. We have 77.6%. We can put that as a percent just for, just to make it easy to see. 77%. It's a little bit too big. It's about 2.5% more than what we're looking for. Usually I say 77%, I'm sorry, 75% plus or minus 2%, hopefully a little bit less, but we could take plus or minus 2%. Right now we're getting 2.5% difference. And when you see the percent too big, that means the second lap is too big of a percent of the first lap, or there's not enough difference between lap one and lap two. If we just do it in terms of time, lap one minus lap two, 4.4. We're looking in the low fours. So that's not enough time between lap one and lap two. Usually 77% will be in the high fours or the low fives. So we're looking at like 4.8, 5.1. That's the difference usually between lap one, lap two. The difference between a good balanced 500, a 500 that usually will win in an elite setting against other people. Because we see not enough time between laps one and laps two, that means that lap two wasn't fast enough for the ability of lap one. So Will Wong is very accelerative. He has a good opening lap. What we would like to see is for him to develop a little bit more speed capacity, and a lot of that is force application, getting stronger, maybe a little bit more dedicated work in the gym towards specifically force production. Um, that's usually what we would prescribe. You want to make sure that your gym work is very targeted, is very specific. You know, we're I'm CSCS, which is kind of the gold standard of strength and conditioning. I'm also a USA weightlifting coach, so there's a lot of very specific strength and conditioning concepts that we apply towards making you faster, and a lot of times that's balancing your force velocity curve. You know, if you're too force deficient, we correct for that. If you're too velocity deficient, we correct for that. So there's some very specific techniques and interventions that we do for cases like this. So we're looking at 77.6%, not a big enough difference between lap one, lap two. We need to develop some force. We need to reach some higher top speed. So that's our 77.63%. Let's take a look here at, you know what? We'll go the other direction. I know Todd probably has the opposite. So let's look at Todd Chesky here. We're looking at lap one divided by lap two, 69%, 69.54. We'll just round it down to 69. Oh, benefit of the doubt, we'll round it up to 70. Still 5% off of what we're looking for. And because it's too small of a percentage, we're looking here 15.45, 15.405, very close, within, hundredth of a second. I'm sorry, 500ths of a second, half a tenth from Will Wong's second lap, right? 35.2, and Todd did a 37.7. So seconds of difference, but very similar on that second lap. So what we're looking at is a huge delta between lap one, lap two. And there's, again, a few reasons for that. Will was force deficient, wasn't reaching top speed enough. Todd is most likely going to be, and it doesn't mean that Will doesn't also need to develop velocity and that Todd doesn't need to develop force. That's not what this means. But Todd is going to be velocity deficient, not quick enough, not explosive enough. And so his standing start relative to his second lap is going to be too big of a disparity because of either standing start technique, and it could be a combination of all of them: standing start technique, rate of force development, pedaling efficiency at high force, which is rate of force development, the rate at which you can develop that force, so high levels of speed. So we have an acceleration problem, we have a lap one problem. We're looking at 7 seconds difference between these, so about 70%. We're looking at 75% plus or minus 2%. So I'll take 73 to 77, but even the extra 0.6% is just a little bit too much. Ideally, we're looking for right on 77. I'm sorry, right on 75%. So we have the opposite problem. Will and Todd, inverse problems here. Then we go down to Kirk Robinson, who I believe really was aiming for his man two in the team sprint. That's what he was training for. There's a mix. There's not a mix-up. There's some shuffling of the teams because Kirk and Aram, they ride with, Sean, and Sean was sick and he was out this year. So, Kirk, who wants to be man one, is really training for his man two and his 500, which means he's optimized really his start versus his finish on these gears. And I believe we came away with some really good gear selection here. So we're looking at lap one divided by lap two, 75.0%. So let's just say, for our purposes, we're looking at bang on the right percentage here, 75%. And the difference in time, let's just figure out what the difference in time is. Yep, 5.1. Remember, and I said it really depends on how fast you're going, but we're looking at like high fours to low fives. So really right on what we're looking for in terms of delta lap one, lap two, 75%. We're happy with that. That again, that doesn't mean because the ratio is right, doesn't mean Kirk doesn't need to go faster. Like we can make him faster. He needs to both get quicker and stronger. It's just that the training that he used and the equipment and the gear that he selected put him in an optimal range. So he really got as much out of this time trial as he probably was going to. If he had a faster start, we would assume that he would also have a slightly faster finish because of how balanced he was on this gear, on the equipment for the conditions of the day and the condition he was in. So good job to us, but it's a team effort. Um, we like to work very collaboratively with the athletes, so it's a little bit athlete guided because we have to listen to how they feel and how they're performing, not just impose our own ideas on them. But we came to a really good agreement on gears and training protocol and taper for him. Okay, so that is lap one, lap two. Let's start looking at. You know what? Let's do this. Oh, I put this in the wrong spot. Let's just do S really quickly. I believe S is also right on here. Lap 1 divided by lap 2. 74.9 again. We're like right bang on what we're looking for. We don't need to talk about it because it's exactly what we would have said for Kirk, right? Right about the same thing. So we're going to look at the third rule. This one's a little bit more obscure. I don't want to say obscure. Maybe it's a little bit more tricky when you think about how am I going to utilize this. The first two are the ones you're going to look at most often. The third one is something I use to reverse engineer sometimes gear selection or other drills. When we're training for the 500, we want to know what type of top speeds do we need to hit, what kind of cadences do we want to hit. So this is how we calculate some of that. Top speed rule, or third half lap and first half lap. Remember, we divide the time trial into 4 half laps: first half, second half, third half, fourth half. We're going to take the third half lap, and that's because the third half lap should be the fastest split of the time trial, the fastest half lap split of the time trial. If your fastest half lap split is your second half, it'll never be your first half lap because you had a standing start. But if it's your second half lap, you are you just didn't speed up enough, right? You should not be peaking that early in the race. If it's the last half lap, you peaked your speed too late, which means you didn't get up to speed soon enough. And the rest of your laps are you have too much exposure to slower speeds. So we really want to peak your speed in that third half lap. And we'll look at one that went backwards. So let's take a look down. Let's take a look down at S. We'll just go to the bottom. So S, we're looking at his third half lap divided by his first half lap. We're looking for 60% plus or minus. There we go, 61%. I love that. There we go. 61%. So usually when we see this, when we look at our percent, this will tell us, did we hit top speed? And this is just a little bit more granular than the first lap, second lap rule. First lap, second lap rule also tells you how is your acceleration versus your top speed, but it has a speed endurance component to it because not only do you have to hit top speed, we're spreading out that average time over a whole 250 meters, which implies a little bit of speed endurance or some extensibility. So when we're looking at the top speed roll, we've narrowed it down to 125-meter segments. And when we look at this, 60% will tell us that we've gotten a peak speed or a peak split that's appropriate for our starting lap. This is a great way. I use this a lot for when we're not in a condition to really do a full 500. So early on in the year, yeah, you could rip out a 500. It's not going to be great. You're not prepared for it. Maybe you should be going through a base training phase or a strength block, where your peak speeds are suffering, right? But your half lap splits usually are going to be pretty similar. So we'll do a half lap start, find the fastest one in a reasonable gear. uh, you know, Whatever you think your race gear is, plus or minus 6 inches. That's kind of a big range. But we're not going to do, if you normally do it in a 96, we're not going to do it in 120. That's just not going to give you some reasonable results. We're also not going to do it in an 85-inch gear if you normally race in a 95. Maybe that 85-inch gear, you'll get started super fast, maybe even possibly a faster half lap. but there's no way it's going to be a faster 500 because you won't be peaking your speed in that third half lap. So plus or minus 4 to 6 inches from your race gear. Do a couple half lap efforts, standing half lap efforts. Let's just say, let's just go down here for all intents and purposes, 12.5 to the half lap. We're going to do 60% of that times 0.6. That gives us 7.5. So that means, okay, our fastest half lap split should be a 7.5. And that can let you know, okay, over the course of 125, I need to be rolling a 7.5. You can calculate what the meters per second is for that. So we have 125 meters is the time trial. There we go. So 16.6 meters per second is about 37.2, 37.3 miles an hour. Average, you're going to peak a little bit higher, but average for that 125 meter split. So it just gives you an idea of what kind of peak miles per hour you need to hit. And I would practice this rolling, flying, how can you hit these top speeds? Usually I wouldn't fly in from the rail. That gives you a little bit extra potential speed, but I would maybe do a pseudo flying style effort off of the blue line. I would roll down off the blue line, maybe a seated flying effort, and see if I can roll a 7.5 or hit an average of 37.3 miles per hour for a half lap split. And this way, am I in the ballpark of what I should be hitting in my 500 without having to have the requisite conditioning to do a whole 500, look at the splits, assess it, decide what's going wrong. We can reverse engineer what your peak speed should be. So we're looking for about 60%, give or take a percent. I don't want to see too much difference, maybe 2%. Let's take a look here at Kirk Robinson. You know what? Let's actually go up here. So Todd, I said that this went backwards, so that's why we'll use Todd. So typically your third half lap split should be the fastest. Todd, you can see here, 7.48. His fastest split was his last half lap, which, not a blazing start here. And that could be for many reasons. I don't know. Could have been too big of a gear for him. Again, there's no such thing as too big or too small. Too big of a gear for his strength, his ability, his technique, his conditioning, his training. So you want to ride the equipment that's appropriate to you and that gives you the best possible results. He had a fast second half, but just there's no way if you lose 7 seconds or, if there's a 7 second delta, there's just so much time left on the table that if he had gone smaller, had a faster start, maybe even had a slightly slower second lap, it still would have ended up being faster. Could be by half a second. Who knows? That's just speculation at that point. So let's do the numbers on this. Third half lap divided by first half lap, 57%, 2.5% away from that 60% we were looking at. It's too small of a percent, which means it's too big of a difference between opening half lap and his third half lap. However, this is not even his fastest half lap. Ideally, we would see that 7.48 in the middle and that 7.9 on the end. Typically, we would see these reversed, and if you hit a 7.48 in the middle, you probably wouldn't drop all the way down to a 7.9 at the end. Basically, what we're looking at is a time trial that negative splits all the way to the end, which means he just didn't spend enough time at top speed. So we need to rethink our conditioning that gets us up to speed sooner, or we need to change the gear for what we're able to do on that day. If you want to go over this data with us, if you want to schedule a free consultation, we can talk to you about what we can do for you and how we can make you faster. info@cyclecoaching.net. Reach out to us there. This is going to be on YouTube. We have our little videos on Instagram, little teasers with the 1-minute tips. Take a look at those. You can message us through there. Reach out. We'll see what we can do for you guys. All right. Until next time.